Hello, my name is Laura and this is a video all about everything I have ever knit for my children. If you haven't seen one of my videos before, I normally make knitting podcasts every few weeks about what I'm working on at the moment or what I've just finished, but this is going to be a little bit different. It's a really rubbish day. It's May, so it's supposed to be nice, but it's not. And we are also in the middle of a house renovation, so as you would expect, I spend a lot of my time sorting through stuff. And this morning I found the first thing that I ever knit, ever. Well, no, I did knit a few things before, but I never completed anything. So it's the first thing that I ever finished as a whole garment. And it got me thinking that, oh, maybe I should get everything together that I've ever made for the kids and kind of see how I've improved in the past 2.5 years of knitting. And I found some gems. There are some self-drafts, there's some pretty hilarious things, but there's also some really nice pieces that I'd completely forgotten about, and some pieces that I'm now gonna package up and put aside, and maybe print off a little picture of my son and daughter wearing it so that in the future I can pass it on to them if they have children. So yeah, but I thought I would bring you along for the journey whilst I'm going through everything. I've written everything down, so I should have all the designers and the yarns and everything. So here we go, let's get started. Oh my god, I just said let's get started. I think that's a YouTube milestone. Let's get started. The very first thing I ever made, ever finished, was this. I can't believe how tiny it is, and this is going to make me so broody. But this sweet tiny little romper, it's called the Eve romper and it's by Pippi Eve, a lovely designer called Samantha. Gorgeous Instagram follow, not just knitting, baking, sewing, decor. Mwah. Wonderful Instagram account to follow. I made this, I think it took me quite a while to make this actually, and it was, I think, the first time I'd ever done increases or decreases. You start here, it's knit flat and then you sew it up at the sides, so it's only 2 pieces, which is great when you're a new knitter. And you start at the bottom and you do the increases to shape the leg, and then you go up and I think you decrease slightly and then decrease here, and then you do the back panel which has the straps attached to it, which you knit, and then there's a little button attached to the straps and a buttonhole in the front. It's all garter stitch, and I remember being so proud of this and so happy. I got these lovely little flowery buttons. Can't even remember where I got them from. It was a small shop somewhere. When I was working on this, I took my son for a little mum and son holiday in Bath when my husband was away on a business trip. I think that I got them from somewhere in Bath. And it makes me laugh, this one, because there's a really obvious to me now mistake in it, and I'll do a little close-up for you, but there is one stitch here on the body, and I remember finishing it being like, what have I done there? Why does that stitch look different? How could I have not seen? I don't understand what even went wrong there. And basically I just did a knit instead of a purl, or I suppose in this case, because it's garter, a purl instead of a knit. And it's just stands out there. And I did at the time think, oh, shall I make a little pocket to stick on the front? But I'm glad I didn't, because it just makes me laugh to see that now. And then if I do ever pass this on to my daughter, I'll be able to say, oh yes, it's the first thing that I ever knit, and you can see this funny little mistake here. My daughter wore this on the day we registered her birth, and I think she wore it one other time after that, but she basically grew out of it so quickly. My daughter, oh, she was a chunky baby. She was so squishy and covered in all this yummy squish, and but she grew very quickly, so it didn't fit her for long. So this is definitely one I'm going to keep hold of and put aside for her. So that's the Eve romper. I knit this in Berger de France Ideal DK, and it's some yarn that my husband bought for me when I first started knitting, and it's in the shade beige rosé, and it's gorgeous. It's my kind of pink. It's a beautiful dusky pink, feminine and girly without being too like sickly sweet. And this yarn I used a lot of actually at first, because it was what was available to me in my local kind of sewing crafty shop, and it's 40% wool, 30% acrylic and 30% nylon. So it's got quite a heavy man-made fibre content, but it does still have wool content, but it makes it really great for kids stuff because it's durable, it's washable, and not overly expensive either. I'm not sure of the exact price point, but I really like Berger de France. They do a lot of wool and acrylic blends, and they never feel plasticky, they never feel acrylic-y. So I would definitely recommend that yarn, and I've used it in another piece, which I shall show you shortly, but not next. Next up we have the second thing I ever knit for my daughter. This is the Calendula baby cardigan. You may recognise that word because it's a design by Sandra Magalhaes. I'm sorry, I'm doing my best, but I've never actually heard that word pronounced, so I don't know how to say it. But we'll just say my lovely friend Sandra. I've done many of her patterns. I've done a few test knits for her, and I knit this using John Arbon Knit by Numbers, and at the time my in-laws lived right next to the John Arbon shop, and I went in and I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't know anything about yarn or wool at the time, and I bought a skein of this, so you know, the full-on twisted up skein, and I tried to knit directly from the skein. Let me know in the comments if you have ever done that, because at the time I felt so stupid, and I can't believe what I'd done, and I'm like, I can't be the only one that's ever done that. I probably am the only one that's ever done that. But anyway, I started to knit this, and then I spent 6 hours hand winding that pile of knots. Oh my god, it was, I think I was up until 3 or 4 in the morning doing it. So yeah, that wasn't fun. But this is a really lovely raglan top down baby cardigan, and again I would highly recommend this pattern. I would always recommend Sandra's pattern because they are so in depth, they are so detailed. Each size, the text has a different colour, which when you're new to knitting is so helpful because there's so much information on the page. It's so easy to look at the wrong size, and you're having to constantly refer back to see which little number is your size. So to have every single one in a different colour, excuse me, is, oh, it's so good. It's really simple. There's no shaping on the arms. Oh my god, just realised. This cardigan also has another major rookie error, and it's that I only bought one skein of this, which was 100 grams, which wasn't quite enough for this. So one sleeve is from a completely different dye lot, and I remember going back into the John Arbon shop and being like, I need another one of these, and they were like, oh, I don't think we have that dye lot anymore. I remember being like, oh, okay, not having any idea what they meant at all. And they were so kind, they went back to their warehouse, they tried to hunt me down another skein in this dye lot, but they couldn't. So one sleeve is a very different, well, no, it's not very different, it's just slightly different. And you can also see that my tension is quite different in this one because there was quite a gap, maybe a month or 2 between knitting the main part of this cardigan and this little extra sleeve, even longer than a month, I think. And you can see that my knitting tension has changed in that time. Obviously, as a new knitter, your ability will change, and then I feel like it kind of settles at your own natural tension. But that's what happened there. This one I'm also going to keep for my daughter because it's a special one. It's got a bit of a funny story, and the yarn itself is so beautiful. It's 100% Falkland merino, and you just can't go wrong with Knit by Numbers. I really should get some of this again because it's a really beautiful DK weight. It's so soft. She wore this quite a few times actually, and there's no pilling on it. It's a little bit fluffy, but there's no pilling whatsoever. So yeah, not that I need to buy any more yarn, but I think you might be seeing some John Arbon Knit by Numbers in the near future. So that's the second thing for Penny. The third thing I made for Penny was a test knit. I don't think this was my first, I think it might have been my first test knit actually. Yeah, I think it was. And this is something that Penny wore a lot. She wore this so much, and to be honest, looking at it, it might still, no, the arms would be too short. Anyway, This is the Bubble Stitch Cardigan by Julie Taylor, also known as Love Fibres, and I'm pretty sure this was my first ever test knit. And I mean, come on, it's so gorgeous. It's so cute. I still can't believe how tiny these things are. I think I knit this in November time, and again, this is the Bergère de France Ideal DK, but this time it's in the shade Brûlé, I think. It's French, I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but because it was November and we were leading up to Christmas, I was like, yes, a nice Christmassy red. It's got this bubble stitch pattern, which looks like it could be quite complicated, and I don't think it is that complicated. I was a relatively new knitter at the time, and I definitely watched some video tutorials before I did it. But it's mainly knit, and then there's one tricky thing on like every 4th row where you knit into a stitch that's like 4 rows below. So it looks really effective, and especially I think on kids clothing, it's like so cute, you know, kids bubbles, they love them. So this is a really lovely pattern if you are wanting to maybe branch out a little bit from your normal baby cardigans. You want something a little bit different but isn't too challenging. It's got like a garter collar and garter cuffs and hem, which I thought was really nice, a bit of a change from a normal rib. And yeah, Penny wore this a lot. I will try and find pictures of the kids wearing these things and insert them as I go along. I'm pretty sure I've got one of Penny wearing this. It's also got a little tag on it that I have made, and it's coming off. It's like half hanging off, and it says Penrose Knits on it. I only used these a few times, and then I felt a bit silly about using them, but it's cute. It's adorable, and I can see here that my knitting is definitely improved from this one to this one. I don't think I used the right needle size for this one because the gauge looks pretty tight, whereas this one looks a bit more relaxed. I did do a gauge swatch for this, though I didn't wash it, I don't think, so it probably wasn't that accurate, but the fit on it was perfect for Penny at the time. Oh my gosh, I might remake this actually, because this pattern is just so lovely. Right, next up for Penny. I think I had a little bit of a break from making things for Penny, because then we went into the summer, and I definitely did less knitting over that summer because it was summer, and that was also the summer that we went into lockdown, so 2020. Yes, because Penny's first birthday was in lockdown, right at the end of the lockdown. So I didn't do too much knitting for her in that time. But what I did make was another Sandra Maggle-Hayes pattern, which was something I received after doing a test knit for her. We're missing one. I did the Calendula Sweater test knit for Sandra, but I can't find the one I did for Penny, but I'll insert a picture here. It's the same as the Calendula Cardigan, but in jumper format, and I've done a few for my son, which you'll see in a little while, but I'll insert a picture. I used the Hobbycraft Groove is in the yarn, and it's like a pink and black and silver self striping thing, and 100% acrylic as far as I'm aware, but quite a soft, quite a nice yarn to use. And I made that jumper for Penny in a day. Quite literally, I cast it on one evening and I'd finished it the next evening. So I guess by that point my knitting skills and speed had greatly improved. Not so much for this guy, which is I say it's the full romper by Sandra Maggle-Hayes, but it's not a true representation because the gauge was like completely off. But it's still kind of cute. This was made during lockdown, as you might be able to tell, because of the rainbow. Obviously it was a big thing at the time, and I used the Rumi cotton DK, which I don't really think is made for garments. It's very heavy, it's very thick. This isn't what I really had in mind when I made this. I kind of wanted a much like a smaller rainbow that kind of mainly just went across the front, but I did the stripes too thick. Also the purple, when Penny wore it, just got lost because that was like right between her legs, so you didn't even get the purple. It was far too big for her when I made it, so I actually had to put elastic in the back, which is quite cool. I think I picked up the stitches and made like a little casing in the grey and then thread the elastic through. I actually tried this on her earlier when I found it, and she can get it on, but the legs, which I also elasticated, don't really fit around her legs anymore. Hilarious. I think it's really, really cute, and it's quite a similar pattern to the Eve romper, but this one has short row shaping in it, I'm pretty sure. Let's see if I can see it. Actually no, maybe it doesn't have short rows, because I'd be able to see it. I'd be able to see it in the colours. Now this doesn't have short row shaping, so again a really nice simple one. This one has got the straps that come over to the back, and you can cross them over, or you can not, up to you. I also did the ribbing on this guy in twisted rib. I think I'd only just discovered that technique at the time, and you can kind of can see it more on the leg and on the top. But there you go, that's my little NHS rainbow lockdown romper that was never actually worn, which is a bit of a shame, but never mind, I might recycle that. Next up for Penny, there was a big gap between that and knitting anything for Penny. Not sure why, but the poor girl didn't get anything for a few months until she got her very own one-of-a-kind personalised little tunic dress plaything. This was my first ever drafted pattern, and it's exactly what I wanted it to be, basically. And I would still like to get this pattern written down, get it tested, get it released, because Penny's worn it so much. I touched upon this in one of my podcasts about how when it comes to making clothes for little girls, I prefer not to put Penny in a dress, because she is a climber and an explorer, and quite often the skirt of a dress just gets in her way. So when I was making this, I wanted something that was like poofy from the kind of chest area and was shorter in the front as it is in the back. I worked it top down. I did my favourite, and you've probably heard me banging on this before if you've seen any of my videos, a folded neckline, and I worked it flat up until the second row of increases, and then I joined it in the round, therefore to create this little keyhole. Toddlers have big heads, so if you've not got any stretch in your neckband, you will need a way of kind of making that hole bigger for them to get their heads in. And I just did like a little crochet chain there for that guy, but I could actually still get this over Penny's head without having to undo it anyway. So it's got a cute little keyhole in the back. The yoke was worked in the round after joining after the keyhole, just gradually increasing, and then I split for the sleeves. I decreased the sleeves, so they were kind of, I wanted like a kind of slim tight fit, and then I did, as usual, the folded under cuff. That's a technique I learned from the Petite Knit Sunday tee, so if you want more information on that, buy that pattern. Now I guess that's not what I'm saying, but I do get a lot of questions about my folded hems, so if you would like me to potentially try and make a tutorial about how I do a folded hem, I will try and do that for you. I don't know when, but to be fair, it's probably my most asked question. You can see in more detail along the skirt of this how the folded hem works. You just basically knit down the front, and then you do a row of purls, which creates this really sharp fold line, and then you continue using a smaller needle, sorry, for the hem than you do your main body. Then you continue in stockinette and then cast off and sew it down. It's really so simple, and I think it creates such a lovely finish. And it also, because this part is double the thickness of this part, it adds a little bit of weight, which holds the kind of the whole thing, holds the skirt down. The back just covers her little nappy bum, and I put some short rows in the back here to create the longer at the back, shorter at the front. So yeah, that's kind of how I made that. I use the Rico Essentials Merino in the shade mauve or mauve, depending on where you come from. don't really know. And I did this on 3.75 needles, so slightly smaller than suggested, and it created quite a nice kind of tight fabric, because I made this for Penny in the autumn and winter. I wanted something that would keep her warm as well as something that she could move about and play in. I think I felted it slightly. I did just, this has been through the washing machine a few times, and that's a lesson I've definitely learned. Just because something survives the wash once doesn't mean it will survive the wash every time. And I noticed the other day that it is starting to kind of get that slightly felted look where the stitches are kind of starting to merge together a little bit. So I'm going to hand wash this from now on, and I would recommend hand washing the Rico Merino if you can. Penny is nearly grown out of this now, which makes me sad. And also it's getting warmer, so it's not really appropriate. So maybe I'll make her a cotton version for the summer. We'll see. So that's, I have named this pattern, and of course it's the Penelope Playdress. So I really should get around to writing that out and getting it tested, but it's quite an intense construction, and there's a lot of instruction to the pattern. And I think last time I tried to write it down, I didn't have enough notes, and I basically need to knit it again whilst writing it all down. I'm sure I'll get around to that at some point. The next up, the penultimate thing for Penny, is her very own Dahlia. And you might be able to tell that it matches what I'm wearing right now. This is my very own chunky Dahlia by Leonard Holmes Samso, also known as Lenit. I wore this in episode 1 of my podcast, which I will put a link to below if you want any more information about this. But obviously I'm going to tell you a little bit more now about Penny's one. This pattern, from what I can tell, only comes as a t-shirt / dress. So you get both designs within one pattern purchase. And the t-shirt version obviously just has little kind of capped frilly sleeves, and it's quite long, the t-shirt version, but the dress has long sleeves and obviously like a long, I think it's got increases to make it a bit more like A-line shaped. So what I did was I kind of mashed the two together. The other hack that I did was the keyhole actually goes down a lot further in the pattern, but I don't know why I joined in the round sooner than the pattern suggested. This pattern is fantastic. There's a reason it's so popular, and there's a reason everyone and their grandma has knit it. The lace pattern is really satisfying. It looks complicated, but it's really not, and it actually becomes quite instinctive after a while. A lot of people have also mentioned, however, that you do a yarn over to create the holes, and when you do a yarn over before a purl, you kind of have to wrap it twice. Whereas when you do a yarn over before a knit, it just wraps around once. So the holes on one side of the leaf are slightly bigger than the other, which annoyed me a little bit at the time. But when it's worn, you can't really tell. I mean, actually, yes, you can tell here on this one that the holes are smaller here than they are here. But that's that's the beauty of a handmade garment. These things happen, and doesn't make the pattern bad or the garment bad, and no one probably other than a knitter would know. Anyway, so I used this using the Rico Essentials Merino again. This time it was in the shade Patina, and I had this left over from a project I made for somebody else, and I love this colour because it's just so beautifully unisex. It's a greeny blue, tealy blue, and it looks beautiful on a boy and it looks beautiful on a girl. So this is a good one to go to, I think, if you're knitting something for someone who doesn't know the gender of the baby they're gonna have. So yeah, that's a colour I'd highly suggest, and it definitely suits Penny because she's got a slightly pink complexion, so it looks nice against that. Like pink and green, they're like complementary, aren't they? One thing about this yarn that didn't happen for this one, and I think it's because I knit it at a tighter gauge. For this I used size 4mm needles. It grew significantly after I made it, and Penny couldn't actually wear it for a while. I don't know what size I knit, but I do know that it was too big for quite a while, and particularly in the neck, and I'm assuming that's because it's a child's garment, so it's to get it on and off, though it didn't need to be. So what I'd probably suggest if I was to make this again is I would work the yoke in the size smaller than what you wanted, and then it do extra increases, because there are, in the adult version, there's raglan after here. I'm not sure if there is in the child or not, but you could add in a little bit of raglan here, or maybe evenly increase up to the number of stitches you need so that it's big enough for the chest. But that's probably the only note I have on that pattern. She's wearing this a lot at the moment because it's got the holes in. It's quite appropriate for spring because it's not too warm. So yeah, that's Penny's little Dahlia jumper. On to the last one. Now this I have spoken about much more in depth in episode 2 of my podcast, which you're more than likely to go and have a little look at. And this is also a self-draft. I've gotten much better at self-drafting, as you'll be able to see when you see some of the things I've made for my son. But this was a really successful self-draft. It's essentially a DK weight cardigan, but I made it with 1 strand of Filcolana Merci and 1 strand of hand-dyed mohair in the crochet corner. I'll put the shades and details and everything in the description box, of course. But this was my first ever experience of steeking. I knit it in the round, apart from the picot top and the folded over hem at the bottom. I just did those flat, and then chopped it up the middle and kind of rolled up the steek stitches and then encased them in the button band. Yeah, so it's a pretty basic cardigan really, though I guess more of a jumper in the style that it was knit and then turned into a cardigan. She wears this a lot. I absolutely love this, and there is a matching beret, but I'm not going to include like accessories and stuff because I've knit the kids a number of hats and they've all been lost, and I don't even know where they all are at the moment. But again, the beret is in episode 2 if you want to see more about that. And I just absolutely love this. It came out exactly how I wanted. I wanted it to be light, wide neck, so it wasn't too close to her skin because it's meant for like spring, summer. I think the sleeves are super cute with the I-cord bind off, though they are a little bit tight on her little wrists. So I don't know how long this is going to fit, how much longer this is going to fit her, but I guess I could always unpick the I-cord and then just do like a ribbed cuff so it fits for a little bit longer, or I could, you know, pull it back a little bit, make it 3/4 length. That could be cute. But yeah, Penny wears this a lot. It's already been washed a few times, and so far the yarn is holding up really well. I haven't got any pilling or anything. The only thing I would have done differently is how I picked up the stitches for the button band, because it's not very good. It's a little bit wonky. But what can you do? What can you do? Never mind. So that's everything I've ever knit for Penny that I can think of. There's some really special pieces in there and a few things I've forgotten about. If you would like any more information about any of these patterns or anything I did when I made them, please feel free to comment below and ask me. I'm quite good with my comments. I usually reply every time someone asks me a question. I'm usually quite quick as well because I'm basically addicted to my phone, so it's like always next to me. So yeah, if you have any more questions about anything you've seen in this video today, feel free to ask. Moving on to my son's clothing. The first thing I ever knit for my son, he was, I think he was about 1.5. It was before my daughter was born, whilst I was pregnant with her, obviously. And it's a pattern that I've actually ended up knitting 2 more times since for other people. And this is the Tin Can Knits Bowline Sweater. I found this mega challenging at the time. It has fisherman's rib, which kind of has a slight brioche look to it, but isn't the same as brioche. There's no kind of yarn overs or anything like that. It's basically it's like an offset rib. It's really hard to explain, but you do get this really lovely kind of chunky, really interesting ribbed effect. This was worked bottom up and is one of the few things I've ever worked bottom up. So you start at the bottom, working in the round, do a little bit of the ribbing and stockinette, and then ribbing up to the armholes, and then you separate it so you work on the front and you work on the back, and then you join it, you sew it together. Or is it 3-needle bind off? It's a 3-needle bind off here at the shoulder, and then you pick up the stitches for the rolled neckband, and then you pick up the stitches for the arms. This has short rows in the arms, and I believe this was the first time I'd ever done short rows. It's wrap and turn, and I remember struggling with it, and you can quite clearly see where the wraps are, and I've not knit them together particularly well at every point, but I was proud that I did it. And there are decreases in the arm, and then again the fisherman rib on the cuff. And my son has worn this a lot. I used the Stylecraft Special Aran in the shade teal. It's 100% acrylic. I just grabbed it from the Wool Warehouse shop when it was open. I can't wait for it to open again. So yeah, it was like not expensive at all. It's 100% acrylic. This has gone in and out of the washing machine and the tumble dryer numerous times. And I'm keeping this aside. To be fair, it has started to pill a little bit. It's always here, isn't it, where it starts to pill. But I'm saving this for my daughter because I've got a feeling this would look super cute on her as well, with some little jeans, and this should fit her by the winter. I really enjoyed this pattern, even though I found it quite challenging at the time. I learnt a lot from it, and I enjoyed it enough to knit it again twice since for my friends' sons. And I did it in like a variegated yarn as well, which looked really nice with this pattern. And it kind of didn't detract from the rib, but made it just a little bit more special. So that's the Bowline sweater that I made for Jeffrey, my little boy. The next one, oh my god, it's quite hilarious. This one, I'm just going to do up the little, well, what was supposed to be a button placket. This was my first ever self-draft. I was so proud of this at the time. I was like, that's it, I'm such a good knitter. Oh my god, I love it so much. Like the arms like point upwards, and it's just so bad. Do you know what? No, it's not even bad. It's brilliant. I'm so proud of it. Jeff wore this so much, and I'll hopefully got some pictures of him in it somewhere. But I used a yarn that I picked up at a local wool shop. To be fair, it's a really cool yarn. Like, it's really cool. It's green, and it's got these kind of like multicoloured like strands through it. I have no idea. I can't remember the make. I'm pretty sure it's a bulky weight yarn, but at the time I didn't even know the real difference between yarn weights, and I don't think I had needles that were bigger than maybe a 4 or a 5, so the gauge on this is really tight, but that's quite good because it makes it quite warm and windproof really. I worked this in pieces, so I kind of half measured my son, and I worked the front panel first, then the back panel, joined it at the shoulders, and then originally I picked up all the stitches around the neck and did a rib, but it was just far too tight. I couldn't get it over his head, so I unpicked the original ribbing and unpicked the seam from the side and added in a button placket, which now I think about it, for someone who did not know what the hell they were doing at the time, it's pretty impressive. And it would be really impressive if it was the right way round. I did do some shaping around the neck here, so it's lower at the front than it is at the back, but the button placket is on backwards, so that the buttons, they're supposed to kind of sit here on the front, so it's like a little design feature, but they actually sit on the back. But at the time I didn't even know that that was wrong. It's only in the future that I've realised that that's not how it's supposed to be. And the arms, I just picked up the stitches really badly. I think that might have been one of the first time I'd done that. oh bless little old me. And I just knit them straight. I think I did do some decreasing here, but as you can see, they go upwards, and I don't really know why. But again, when it was on him, it was absolutely fine. I'm trying to remember if I'd done what I'd knit before this. There was, if I remember rightly, a white version of this, but it never got completed. It never got finished because it was like miles too big, and I ended up using the yarn for something else. So I think I must have had an attempt at this before, but I don't remember doing an actual jumper, because this one was definitely after this one, because I remember when I put the short rows in for this, I was like, oh yeah, that's how you make it so that the arms don't like point upwards rather than downwards. Who even knows? So yeah, that was my first ever self draft, and I'm super proud of it. Penny never wore this actually, it didn't fit her at the right time of year, but this is a super precious one for me. I don't think Jeff's children would ever want to wear it, but I'll probably keep it anyway, just as a kind of reminder to me of how far I've come. After that, there was another self draft, which went a lot more smoothly, and I'm looking at it now and I'm like, oh, this is mega cute. A little vest, a little slightly 70s looking retro vest. At this point I had so many scraps of material, so many scraps of yarn. I was like, I need to use them up. This is getting ridiculous. So in here you've got a complete mix of Aran weights. I think there's some DK that I held double, and oh my god, you know what, I haven't looked at this in so long. This is really good. This is really good. It's obviously, it's a vest, so it's really simple, and I worked it bottom up in the round to here and then split. Well, when I made it for Jeff, it was too big. It was too wide on the arms, and it wasn't quite long enough, and it looked a little bit off, and I'm sure I've got a picture of it and wearing it somewhere. But as a garment, as for the quality of the knitting, it's really good. It's really textured, so you've got little areas of moss stitch or seed stitch, I think, some little garter rows, loads of different colours. Are there holes where I've changed colours? Probably. No. I think there aren't holes where I've changed colours because I've weaved all my ends in along there, so I think I must have closed those holes up as I went. But as a garment, I think this is really pretty cool. Our house was built in the 70s, so I've kind of developed a little bit of a liking for retro kind of things and fashion in particular. So I might see if this fits my son now. Actually, I made it about a year ago, so it was before we moved into this house. It's probably too short for him now, but maybe I'll have another go at this, because in general the kind of mixture of textures and colours I really like. I'd probably make the neckband like a folded one, because it's a little bit, I've done twisted rib yet. I was definitely going through a twisted rib phase. I think I made this shortly after I made this, and I think the reason I liked twisted rib at the time was because I was a relatively new knitter, and even using smaller needles for ribbing, it would always look like really big and really poofy, and I didn't like the look of ribbing. So when I discovered the twisted rib, you got a much more kind of tighter, refined rib, which is probably why I used it so much. I'm at a point now where my ribbing gauge is pretty good, and even just a normal 1x1 looks really nice. So yeah, I think I might have to give this a little revisit. It's funky, right? Let me know. What do you think? Do you think this is cool, or do you think it looks like a granddad vest, which is pretty sure that's what my husband had to say about it. Moving on, we're now getting to a point where it was about a year ago, and I mentioned earlier that I did a test knit for the Calendula Sweater for my daughter, and after I'd made hers, because I made it so quickly, I decided to do another one in a size up, so that Sandra had another reference. So this is the Calendula Sweater again. In, what did I make this in? I made this in Paint Box Yarns. I'd made my nephew a navy jumper, and I'd run out of yarn and ordered another one, but I'd ordered the wrong colour. So this is the Paint Box Yarns Simply Aran in Sailor Blue. Again, 100% acrylic. This has been through the wash and the tumble dryer numerous times. There's a tiny little bit of pilling, but nothing a garment shaver wouldn't sort out. And this was, I think, my very first venture into cables. And again, for a first attempt, I think it's pretty good. You've got cables down the front. Obviously this was kind of a test knit, not a test knit, but because I'd already completed one test knit 2 pattern, I decided to have a little bit more fun with my second one. Again, twisted rib on the collar and the cuffs and the bottom, and I put 2 cables down the front, and there's a cable at the underarm as well, which I think is a fun detail. The one thing I would do now, which I hadn't really realised in my knitting naivety, is the cables both go in the same direction. And I would, if I was to do this again, you've got this cable that kind of leans in, and I just did the same cable either side, but I would change it so that this cable twists, they both twist towards the centre. So on one side you hold the stitches forward, and then on the other cable you'd hold the stitches back, so they both twist inwards towards each other. Doesn't really make a difference, doesn't matter, it's just slightly more aesthetically pleasing, I suppose. And I made this for my son the first week we went into lockdown, and I remember, that's my daughter kind of banging against the baby gate that's in the living room so she can't get out. Dad is doing a great job of keeping the kids quiet right now. Anyway, he tends to wear it in the morning because he hasn't got a dressing gown, so he just like to shove it on, and it's like soft and cozy but not too bulky or anything like that. I can't imagine him wearing a dressing gown. I'd imagine it would get in his way quite a bit, because my kids are like, wake up, let's get on with the day. There's no like chilled out watching the telly or sitting eating your breakfast. They're like, get up, play, let's go. Whoa, 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 whoa. So a dressing gown wouldn't really work. So that's actually when my son wears most of his hand knits. We're very, very fortunate to have a few other hand knitted jumpers from my friend as presents. So they tend to wear those most mornings as well, if this one's in the wash. So yeah, that's another Calendula pattern. And if you hadn't had enough of that particular pattern, here's one more for you. This guy featured in episode 2 of my podcast as a finished object. It's Calendula Sweater instead, apart from the fact that it's got a rolled hem here, and I did cheeky little stripe. The yellow was some donated yarn that my mum gave me. It was 50% acrylic, 50% wool, though I don't know the brand or the shade, and the white stripe was just from my stash. And again, really simple raglan. I made this slightly oversized for my son so that he can wear it all through the year and into autumn. I had a little bit of extra length. I love it on him, he looks super cute. And obviously there's a bit more information about the process of this and everything I did to make it in episode 2. One thing I've realised since, I've never really done any stripy knitting beforehand, and my friend Anna has also done a yellow and white stripy calendula, and she messaged me saying, oh, I've got holes up the back of mine. What did you do to stop having holes where you change colour? And the answer was, I didn't. And I hadn't even noticed until we started talking about it. But you can see when I stretch the fabric open a little bit, there are holes where I've changed yarn. I don't know if you can see that or not. So basically what you're meant to do when you're striping your yarns like this is you're supposed to twist the yarns together every time you change, but I didn't do that. But again, I don't really mind. It's down the back of the garment. The garment doesn't stretch on him, so you can't really see it when he's wearing it. I suppose the more I stretch it, the more obvious they'll be. So yeah, even my most recent knit, this was literally a few weeks ago, has a little error in it. And I think that's quite a good message from going through all of these things, is that it doesn't really matter if you make little errors, because sometimes you won't even realise they're there, and most of the time I find you just forget about them, really. You forget that they seem so important and so like obvious when you're making them, but once you've finished it and you've worn it a couple of times, you forget about those tiny little errors. And I think that is also what makes handmade items beautiful, the fact that they're not quite perfect, the fact that you couldn't just get them off the shelf. And I think for a long time I got really like caught up in making sure everything was perfect, and if something went wrong I'd get really annoyed and would end up frogging it or not using it. So if I could go back and tell how old would I have been? 31-year-old Laura when she knit this and she got really upset about the fact that one arm was a different colour than the other, I'd go back and say, don't sweat it. Doesn't matter. It's still gorgeous. Look how hard you worked on this. You could not have made this a few months ago. How wonderful is that? So that's what I'd say to her, and that's what I'd say to you. Don't sweat small stuff. is the message of this video. That's the moral of the tale. I'm just talking gibberish now. So there you go. That is everything I have ever made for my children. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've not done something like this before, a kind of like standalone thing. So if you enjoyed it, let me know. If there's anything you think I could improve on. I know the setup isn't great, but that's just my life at the moment. It's either dodgy setup, but we get a video, or no video at all. But if there's anything you think that I could improve on when it comes to what I'm talking about and how I'm talking about it, then please do let me know in the comments, because I'm really enjoying making these videos and I want to make more and I want to make them well. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.